Matt, I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while. I
Thank you.
love all of the sales energy, and that's what I'm going to call it. You have so much positive energy around sales. But before we get into that, tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are, your journey, and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah. So, Dustin, before the show started, Dustin was telling me he grew up from a long line of insurance people, right? So that was kind of in
Mhm.
his blood. I grew up from a long line of broke people, so a little, little bit different. My mom, best lady in the world. Shout out Gina if she's out there. She's born and raised South Boston, so she talks like Matthew. Get a job. Her mom was an emergency room nurse. Her father, my grandfather, was a bus driver. Um, and long story short, when I was a kid, uh, there was an extended period of time where my mom was a single mom, raising two boys, my brother and myself, making, are you ready? Drum roll, $4,000 a year. And this was the 80s. So 4,000 went a little bit further, but not a lot further. So,
Wow.
yeah, things were pretty tough for me. And I didn't grow up in that entrepreneurial background where, I had that encouragement. I had leadership. I had guidance, with your guys' principles. Nobody was telling me to work smarter, not harder. It was pretty much just a childhood, not to paint too doom and gloom of a picture, but I'm sure there's some folks out there listening that had a similar childhood. It was one of these where summertime came and you were bummed out because that's where you got your free hot lunch, was school.
Mm.
But I'm not telling you that to have a sob story about my childhood. I'm telling you this story. The reason why I'm telling you this is there was a moment, a lot like probably a lot of our listeners and viewers out there moments. Maybe this will be a moment for some of them where, like, universe opened, somebody gave me an unlock code. And that moment happened. I was at home by myself, which broke kids were a lot, because my mom worked at a church many, many hours during the day. And I was playing with a toy. I actually went and got it before the podcast. This is exactly what I was playing with. This is a
Wow.
I've kept it my whole life. 1979. It was one of my few toys. Matchbox Porsche Turbo 79. Kelly Green's the color.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
heard this noise. And I looked up from the mud that I was playing in. Boom. Same year, same color. I don't know if you're religious, don't care. Call it whatever you want to call it. The universe presented the exact car I was playing with in front of me. And
Wow.
yeah, you didn't, where I grew up, you didn't see this very often either,
Were you
because
manifesting that?
I don't know. Well, we will never know. I'll find out, maybe when I cross over, why this was presented to me. But it was, I heard the noise, I saw the car, and I did what Dustin would have done. Chris, I did what you would have done if you were broke and unsupervised playing with the car and you saw the car. I ran after it. And I was not 8 years old at the time, maybe 9. Ran after it, and I knew kind of where it was going because there was an attorney that lived kind of in the proximity of where we lived, and that was the rich person. I was like, he bought a Porsche. Sure enough, the car was parked out in front of Mr. Carroll's house, and I waited, thinking Mr. Carroll would come out. He didn't. A gentleman in a suit, right, kind of dressed the way I am in today, came out, and I did classic movie line, "Mister, is this your car?" Right? What do you do? Thinking he must be a drug dealer or something. Because that's what broke kids think. If you have a good car, you must be a drug dealer. And the guy was like, well, I'm in sales. And I was like, it just changed my whole life. I was like, not that, but this, what happened? I said, sales? He goes, yeah, I work for a company called Texas Instruments. I sell computers. And I said, that must be the best computer in the world. And here's where my whole life changed. Not because this guy was a scumbag or manipulative. He wasn't. Best salesman I ever met. Don't know who he was today. But he talked to me like an adult, and he goes, no, kid. He used bad language. It's okay if I use it. He goes,
Yep.
it's a real piece of shit. It was a Texas, believe it was called a Texas Instruments TI, maybe a 99-4. And at the time, Texas Instruments could not sell any of those. And this guy driving this Porsche was their number one person, and apparently he was the only guy in the country that was moving them. And I said, how are you making money selling a bad computer? He goes, it's not the product, kid. It's if you can understand people's current situation, if you can figure out what's going on in specific people's lives, and even the worst product has one or two things that are really great about it. And he says, I'm the only person at the company that seemed to figure out that this computer will allow you to do what we call calendar entries. And by the way, this was big time in like 1981, where you could type away on a keyboard and basically kind of Excel before they had Excel. And he said, do you know anything about the gentleman that lives in this house? I said, yeah, Mr. Carroll. And he goes, well, do you know about him? And I said, yeah, he's an attorney. And he goes, what do you know? And I kind of stopped the guy and I was like, the twitching? And he goes, yeah, he has Parkinson's. And I knew he had Parkinson's. I was a little bit embarrassed saying it. Everybody in the neighborhood knew the guy had Parkinson's, right? Like we could see him twitching as he would drive his Volvo. And he said, listen, here's the deal, kid. Mr. Carroll's a great guy. He's a pretty successful attorney, but he's got a problem. With his Parkinson's, he's got to take medication at about 3 p.m. every day. Now, here's the thing. That medication stops his tremors, but it also stops him from driving. So his office is in Westminster, Colorado. So he has a choice. He can either leave his office at 2 p.m. every day and get home and take his medication, or he can take his medication at his office and he has to pay somebody to drive him to work and back from work. He said, here's what this computer is going to allow Mr. Carroll to do. It's going to allow Mr. Carroll to work all the way till 2 p.m., drive home, take his medication, and then do all the little things that he would normally have to do at the office, entering his calendar entries, taking notes, putting notes in a file for a client. He can continue to work on this computer at home, which, by the way, was earth-shattering at the time. Nobody had computers at home. Yeah. And he's like, we're changing his life today. And I was like, holy cow. Like, here's a guy driving a Porsche and told me that he sells a POS computer. And I'm like, so he must, because that's what I was brought up with, is if you're rich and successful, you must be a bad or evil person. And I'm like, holy cow, he's making Mr. Carroll's life better. Right. And I remember, and that was the first breakthrough. Here was the second. Because at the time, I had some undiagnosed visual problems. It turns out I had some muscular things with my eyes. It was dyslexia, but it was a neurological problem with my eyes. And I eventually got therapy and fixed all of this once I had my own businesses as a teenager. And but I said to the guy, I was like, man, that's cool. I would love to do that. And he's like, why don't you? And I was like, I can't do that. I'm not smart. Because everybody had told me I wasn't smart because I couldn't read. And he's like, never talk bad about yourself. And I was honest with him, and I was like, I can't really read and I can't really spell. And the guy was like, you don't need any of that to be successful. You just have to have the guts to talk to people like you did with me. And you have to care enough to help them. And then here's where, and you guys, I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm 50. You might remember this. He goes, and on the spelling thing, I've got you covered, kid. And he opened the front of this Porsche and he pulled out, this was the freaking hot toy. And I was a kid that this was like my only toy, a Matchbox car. Yeah. Hot toy of the time, manufactured by the company that he worked for, Texas Instruments, a Speak and Spell. Do you guys remember Speak and Spell at all? Vaguely. It was the hot thing, right? It had a keyboard on it and it would show you the word, and it had AI. Well, no, it wasn't AI. It had a robotic voice that would say the word, right? It would speak the word to you so you could spell the word. And I was like, this is so awesome. Thank you. So it was $79 at the time. That would be like, I don't know, $200 in today's money. I was like, thank you so much. And I made a smart ass comment. I said, my brother's going to beat me up and take it. And he's like, hey kid. And as I was walking around, it was like a freaking Coke commercial of the day. He's like, hey kid. And I turned around with my Speak and Spell. He goes, come on back here. He opened the trunk and he gave me a second one. He goes, give this one to your bro and tell him to lay off of you. Never saw the guy again. Right. That's but from that moment on, I was like, wait a minute. I don't have to be born rich. I don't have to know how to spell. Right. I just have the guts to talk to people, and I have to care enough to help their situation. And so from that moment on, about 8 years old, I started going door to door, sweeping rocks. And then I was like, man, I need more of this mentor thing in my life. So I started seeking out everybody in Boulder, Colorado. I was unsupervised. I had a bike. The bus was cheap. I would go to businesses in Boulder, places like Celestial Seasonings Tea. And I would just literally show up at these businesses as a kid and be like, hey, do you guys want trash picked up in your parking lot? Do you want your weeds pulled? What do you guys need? And they're like, well, we can't hire kids. And I'm like, I don't want any money. And this is where this is dumb luck, but I was really smart. I never asked for money. And I was like, I just want to be around, because I didn't have a dad at the time. My dad, great guy, he just passed. He was my stepdad. But he didn't come into my life until I was about 10. But I didn't have a dad, and I just hung around people that were inventors, managers, business owners. And that's where Easton University has come from, is there's little cheat codes. And we can talk about a few of them on this session today that I learned from these mentors as early as like 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, that by the time I was 16 years old, nobody knew this because there was no social media at the time. I owned Quality Publishing, which was the company that published government auction guides in the back of like Car and Driver magazine. Like when you look back, they're like, buy Porsches seized at government auctions. That was my company at 16 years old. And that's simply because of like meeting people like you, Chris, like you, Dustin, as a kid, and having this open dialogue with them. They're like, Psh, what do you think's cool? And I'm like, cars are cool, right? One day I'm going to get one, right? And they're like, how are you going to get a car? Oh man, I'd buy it at a government auction. Why don't you make a guide to, like, these people just give flowing ideas at me and to one of your practices, right? Take chances, learn from others. There's our TNRL and hustle. That's all I did as a kid. And it worked. It didn't. Now here's the thing for the listeners. It didn't work all the time, right? You only got to bat about like 8% and then have the fortitude to go, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try a different iteration of this. And these businesses will work for you. By the time I was 20, I think I was on my 5th or 6th business, paid my way through college. And then because of my upbringing, I was the first person in my family to go to college. And of course it was, you need to work for a Fortune 500 company. So I worked for the big companies, big logos out there for a while, and then eventually came back to owning my own businesses. And now to where I'm at right now, full-time, eastonuniversity.com with the sales coaching. It's everything that I've learned from my mentors, everything that I've learned from owning my own business, a synthesis of all of the millions of dollars that big Fortune 500 companies spent on me for training. There's some good stuff in there, but there's also a lot of garbage and misinformation. Pulled all that out. It's all the useful. And that's why I think Chris following me on LinkedIn, it's just useful stuff, right? Like just useful stuff. And hopefully we can share some of that useful stuff right now on the podcast. But that's my life story, guys.
Fantastic.
Sales reps, managers, business owners, entrepreneurs, what I'm about to tell you, this is going to hurt, but trust me, it will be well worth it. I want you to think back to that excitement you had when you first got started. Maybe it was your first day. You thought about all of the lives that you were going to change with your amazing product, your business, your service, your solutions. And hey, let's be honest here, you were going to make a lot of money in the process of helping people, helping businesses change their lives. But it didn't work out exactly that way, did it? If you're anything like me, if you're anything like most people in sales, you found it was just a little bit more difficult to close those deals than you thought, or maybe you're struggling right now. Now, I warned you, this is the part that's going to hurt, but in order for this to work, you and I need to be honest with each other. I want you to think about all the reasons that you're not hitting your targets, all the reasons you're not making the sales that you had anticipated making. Is it the economy, your competition, your territory, your pricing? Maybe it's your manager, your product, your service, your solution. Here's the part that's going to hurt. There's a 94% chance it is none of those, and it's time you face reality. The reason why you have to work so hard just to close a single deal has nothing to do with the economy, nothing to do with your competition, your territory, your manager, your product, your price, your service. The reason why it's so hard for you is you simply haven't learned a better sales process. But wait, you've had sales training from your company. Yeah, I did too. You've read some sales books. I read just about every single one of them. Or maybe you're saying to yourself, well, I was always born a salesperson. Nobody is born knowing how to sell more than they're born knowing how to speak Cantonese or fly an F-22 fighter jet. And by the way, the right sales process is a lot easier to learn than a language or flying an airplane, but you still have to learn it. My name is Matt Easton. I'm the founder of Easton University, and if you'll let me coach you, I can show you how to sell more than you've ever imagined without being pushy, without being manipulative, without following some super complex system where you spend more time trying to figure out what stage your deal is in than actually closing deals. If you will let me coach you, you will never, ever, ever, ever find yourself blaming the economy, your products, your price, your manager, your territory, your competition again, because you're gonna be in total control of the sales process and the outcomes. I've devoted my life to unlocking the perfect sales process, and I wanna coach you the same way I've helped thousands of other people in the exact same position that you are right now sell a reported $3.47 billion, yeah, that's billion with a B, over the last 12 months. I've been where you're at right now. I know how to help you. I can show you in just a matter of minutes what will take you years of trial and error to learn on your own. Now, if you've made it this far, but you're saying to yourself, it can't be that simple, just trying a new sales process alone will not get me to where I want to go. I know exactly what you're feeling. I said those exact same things, and I was wrong. Having the right sales process changed absolutely everything for me. So I want you to do me and yourself this favor and spend just a minute or two over at eastonuniversity.com checking out what we've built. Now, if you spend a couple minutes and you decide that our coaching can't help you, it can't help you change everything about your career, everything about your life, no harm, no foul. You can continue to do things the way you're doing them right now. But just imagine, what if you head over to eastonuniversity.com right now and it connects with you? What if it is that simple? Suddenly everything starts to make sense and everything changes for you. Your career, your income, your goals, your company. You start heading in the direction you always thought you could. Isn't it worth taking a couple minutes and seeing if that might be the case? Easton University is more than a platform. It's more than live coaching with me. It's your future, and you and your future are worth it. Thank you so much for watching. I'm glad you and I have met each other, and I look forward to seeing you over at eastonuniversity.com right now.